My child, something has shifted quietly in the heart of the one connected to you, and the most surprising part is not that marriage has crossed their mind, it is the reason they can no longer imagine their future without wondering what life beside you could become. There are decisions people announce loudly, and then there are decisions that begin in silence, long before anyone else notices. This one began in silence. It did not arrive as a dramatic declaration. It appeared during ordinary moments when your soulmate was alone with their thoughts, when there was nobody nearby to impress, persuade, or convince. And somehow, in those unguarded minutes, the same image kept returning, you. Not simply your face. Not simply a memory. Something deeper, the feeling of being understood without having to perform, the strange calm that enters the room when someone realizes they may have finally met a person around whom they can become more honest. Don't skip. Because the secret reason is not what you might expect. It is not about perfection. It is not because every question has disappeared. In fact, what changed inside your soulmate happened because they finally understood something about you that they once overlooked. For a long time, they may have believed love was supposed to feel like constant excitement, endless certainty, or some flawless story where nothing complicated ever happened. But slowly, experience taught them something different. A lasting connection is not measured only by the moments that make the heart race. Sometimes it is revealed by the person whose presence still matters after the noise settles. And when your soulmate began thinking seriously about the future, they noticed that you remained there, in the quiet spaces of their mind, in their hopes, in the little decisions they imagined making years from now. That realization did not frighten them. It softened them. Because suddenly the question changed from, "Do I feel something for this person?" to something far more meaningful. Why does every version of the future that feels peaceful somehow include them? Stay till the end, because that question opened a door they had been avoiding for longer than they wanted to admit. There was a moment recently, small enough that nobody else would have considered it important, when your soulmate caught themselves thinking about an ordinary day with you. Not a celebration. Not a perfect vacation. Not some cinematic moment beneath glowing lights. Just an ordinary day. Maybe waking up and hearing your voice nearby. Maybe sharing a meal after a long afternoon. Maybe laughing about something nobody else would understand. Maybe sitting in comfortable silence without needing to fill every second with words. And unexpectedly, that simple picture affected them more deeply than every dramatic fantasy they had entertained before. Because that is when they understood, they did not only want unforgettable moments with you. They wanted ordinary ones. And when someone begins desiring the ordinary parts of life with another person, something inside the meaning of love begins to change. Listen carefully here, because this is where the message becomes personal. Your soulmate has been paying attention to something you may not realize you have been showing them. They notice the way you continue becoming yourself even when nobody is applauding. They notice that beneath your strongest moments, there is tenderness. Beneath your quietness, there are things you care about deeply. Beneath the parts of you that sometimes seem guarded, there is a heart that does not give itself carelessly. And perhaps they once misunderstood that. Perhaps they mistook your pauses for distance, your independence for indifference, or your patience for a lack of feeling. But time has a way of revealing what quick judgments cannot. Somewhere along the way, they began recognizing that you were not trying to create an impression, you were simply being real. And that authenticity became difficult for them to forget. Something important is waiting for you, because the secret reason behind their decision is connected to this very realization. They are not imagining marriage because they suddenly decided you must become someone different. They are imagining it because they have started understanding who you already are. There is a profound difference between being loved for an imagined version of yourself and being chosen after someone has had enough time to notice your humanity. Your soulmate has seen that you can have uncertain days and still care. They have seen that you can become quiet and still feel deeply. They have sensed that you carry dreams you do not always explain. They have noticed your imperfections, your hesitation, your moments of strength, your moments of softness, and instead of making the connection feel smaller, those discoveries made it feel more real. That is what has been changing everything. Not fantasy. Recognition. And perhaps this explains why their thoughts about commitment arrived differently than they expected. They assumed the person they would marry would make every question disappear. Instead, they encountered someone who made them willing to explore the questions honestly. They assumed certainty would feel loud. Instead, it began feeling calm. They assumed they would know through some enormous sign. Instead, the realization came through dozens of tiny moments that quietly started pointing in the same direction. Imagine your soulmate holding their phone one evening, scrolling without really seeing what was on the screen, when suddenly their mind wandered toward you. They remembered something you said. Maybe it was not even romantic. Perhaps it was one sentence that revealed how you think, what you value, or the kind of life you want to build. For some reason, that sentence stayed. They placed the phone down. The room became quieter. And instead of distracting themselves immediately, they allowed the thought to remain. Could I actually build a life with this person? The surprising thing was not that the question appeared. The surprising thing was how natural the answer felt. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Simply possible. Beautifully possible. And that possibility began following them into other moments. When they saw a couple walking somewhere together, they thought differently. When someone mentioned marriage, their mind moved toward you faster than they expected. When they imagined a future home, your presence somehow appeared inside the picture. When they thought about difficult days, they did not only ask who would celebrate with them, they wondered who they could be honest with when life was ordinary, complicated, or uncertain. Again, your name returned. There is another layer, though, and this is the part they may not have fully admitted even to themselves. Your soulmate has begun to understand that loving you challenges them to grow, not by becoming someone false, but by becoming more emotionally honest. There are things they could ignore when they were alone. Feelings they could postpone. Conversations they could avoid. Patterns they could pretend did not matter. But the possibility of building something lasting with you has made them look at themselves differently. Suddenly they are asking questions like, can I communicate better? Can I be more consistent? Can I stop letting pride speak when honesty would be kinder? Can I become the kind of partner who does not only want love, but knows how to care for it? That is not a small shift. Because marriage, when imagined seriously, stops being only about finding the right person. It becomes a mirror asking, what kind of person am I becoming? And your soulmate has started looking into that mirror. Maybe you have felt a subtle difference. Maybe their energy around you has seemed more thoughtful, more observant, or strangely careful. Perhaps there have been moments when they wanted to say something but stopped. That hesitation does not necessarily mean absence of feeling. Sometimes people become more careful when something begins mattering more. They realize certain words cannot be taken back. They recognize that promises should not be spoken merely because a moment feels emotional. And so instead of rushing, they begin examining whether their feelings can survive reality. Your soulmate has been doing something like that internally. They have been testing the idea of a future with you against ordinary life, responsibilities, differences, personal growth, and everything that commitment actually requires. And the remarkable part is that the thought of you keeps surviving those questions. But stay a little longer, because we still have not reached the deepest reason. There is one particular truth heaven's message seems to place gently in front of you. Your soulmate is not drawn toward marriage simply because they are afraid of losing you. They are drawn toward it because they have discovered what they want to protect and nurture with you. That difference changes everything. Fear says, hold on so this person cannot leave. Mature love says, build something where both people are free to remain because what they share is worth caring for. Your soulmate is slowly moving from the first understanding of attachment toward the second understanding of partnership. They are beginning to picture not possession, but participation. Not control, but companionship. Not one person disappearing into another, but two lives learning how to walk forward side by side. And suddenly, marriage no longer looks to them like the ending of a love story. It looks like the beginning of a deeper one. There may have been a time when they thought commitment would take something away from them, their independence, their freedom, their sense of identity. But their connection with you has challenged that assumption. Because when they picture the right kind of relationship with you, they do not see themselves becoming smaller. They see the possibility of becoming more grounded. They imagine two people encouraging each other's dreams instead of competing with them. They imagine disagreements handled with respect instead of winning and losing. They imagine being able to say, I don't understand yet, but I want to. They imagine coming home, not merely to a place, but to a relationship where both people are allowed to be human. And there is something your soulmate may never have told you directly, you have made them think about home differently. Home is no longer just walls, rooms, keys, or an address. In their mind, home has begun to resemble emotional safety, the ability to remove the performance, put down the defenses, and still be treated with care. Something about you has given them a glimpse of that possibility. Perhaps it happened when you listened without immediately judging. Perhaps when you gave them space instead of demanding an instant answer. Perhaps when you remained yourself rather than reshaping your entire personality to receive their approval. Whatever the exact moment was, it left an imprint. And now, when they imagine marriage, they are not merely imagining a ceremony. They are imagining that feeling becoming part of everyday life. This is why the decision formed quietly. There was no need for an audience. Some of the biggest decisions of the heart happen when nobody is watching. They happen while someone is driving home, washing a cup, staring through a window, or lying awake for a few extra minutes because one thought refuses to disappear. Your soulmate reached one of those moments. They began remembering the different people and experiences that had shaped their understanding of love. Then they compared those old ideas with what they felt around you. And something became obvious. What they had once considered exciting was not always sustaining, and what they had once overlooked as simple could actually be precious. Your connection began teaching them that peace can be powerful. Consistency can be romantic. Being understood can matter more than being endlessly impressed. A person who remembers small things about you can sometimes touch the heart more deeply than someone who makes grand promises. Don't skip now. Because this next realization is the one that surprised them most. They discovered that when they think about becoming older, achieving goals, changing careers, moving through different seasons, laughing at memories nobody else remembers, or facing the ordinary unpredictability of life, they do not only imagine what they want to accomplish. They imagine who they want beside them while accomplishing it. And your presence keeps appearing there. That is the secret reason beginning to reveal itself. They are not merely in love with the idea of who you are today. They are fascinated by the possibility of who the two of you could become over time. They see something unfinished between you, not unfinished in a painful way, but unfinished like the first pages of a story whose most meaningful chapters have not been written yet. They sense room for growth. Room for laughter. Room for healing old misunderstandings. Room for new traditions that belong only to the two of you. Room for discovering each other again and again as years reshape both of you. And perhaps that is why the idea of marriage has started feeling less like a sudden leap and more like a natural direction. Yet there is still one thing holding them in silence. Not because they do not know what they feel. Because they understand that deciding something privately and speaking it aloud are different thresholds. The heart can whisper, "This is the person," long before the mouth knows how to explain why. Your soulmate is standing somewhere near that threshold now. They are gathering the courage to translate an internal realization into something real. They may be wondering how you would receive it. Whether you have imagined the same future. Whether your heart would recognize the sincerity beneath their words. Whether the timing is right. And most of all, whether they can express the reason without making it sound smaller than it feels. Because how do you explain that someone gradually became part of your definition of tomorrow? How do you describe the moment when "I care about you" quietly transforms into "I want to build with you"? There is no perfect sentence for that. Maybe there does not need to be. Maybe the most meaningful declaration will not arrive polished. Maybe it will come through a pause, a nervous smile, an unexpected conversation, or one honest sentence spoken without decoration. And when that moment arrives, remember what this message has been revealing. The most important part will not be the grandness of the words. It will be the intention beneath them. Your soulmate's heart has been learning that marriage is not about finding a person who guarantees a perfect future. It is about recognizing someone with whom they are willing to create a meaningful one. Someone worth communicating with when things are unclear. Someone worth choosing again when novelty becomes familiarity. Someone whose dreams they want to understand, not overshadow. Someone beside whom ordinary life still feels like something they would be grateful to experience. And somehow, when they asked themselves who fits that picture, they kept arriving at you. But there is one final detail you have not heard yet. One small moment changed this from a beautiful thought into something closer to a decision. It was not dramatic. Nobody else noticed it. You may not even remember doing it. Yet your soulmate remembers. Something you said, something you did, or perhaps something you chose not to do showed them exactly what kind of partner you could be when nobody was trying to impress anyone. That moment became the quiet proof their heart had been searching for. And in the next part of this unfolding story, that moment matters more than everything that came before it, because once you understand what they saw in you, you will understand why the thought of marrying you stopped feeling like a distant possibility and started feeling like a future they genuinely wanted to move toward. The moment your soulmate remembers most clearly was almost invisible while it was happening. There was no dramatic music, no perfect setting, no carefully chosen words. You were simply being yourself, and that is exactly why it reached them so deeply. They had been carrying something quietly that day, something small enough to hide behind an ordinary expression but heavy enough to change the way they moved through the hours. Maybe they were tired. Maybe their mind was crowded. Maybe they were trying to solve something they did not yet know how to explain. They expected the world to keep demanding something from them: answers, attention, strength, certainty. And then somehow, you did the opposite. You gave them room. You did not turn their quietness into a problem that needed immediate fixing. You did not make their mood about you. You did not force them to perform happiness so that everything around you could feel comfortable. You simply allowed them to be human. That was the moment. It may sound almost too simple, but sometimes the heart makes its biggest decisions through the smallest experiences. Your soulmate noticed how different it felt to be around someone who did not need them to become more convenient in order to be loved. And after that moment passed, something stayed behind. A question. A very serious one. What if this is what partnership is supposed to feel like? Don't skip. Because that question changed the direction of everything they had been thinking about you. Until then, marriage may have lived somewhere in their imagination as a future concept, something beautiful but distant, something people considered after every uncertainty had disappeared. But now they began to understand that commitment is not built after uncertainty vanishes. It is built when two people learn how to hold uncertainty without turning against each other. And what they saw in you that day gave them a glimpse of that kind of love. Not perfect love. Not effortless love. Something more believable. Something steady enough to make room for complicated days. Something gentle enough to survive silence. Something honest enough to say, you do not have to have everything figured out for me to respect you. Your soulmate carried that realization home with them. They probably did not tell anyone. They may not even have known how to describe it yet. But later, when the day became quieter, their mind returned to you again. They replayed the moment differently this time. They noticed details they had missed while it was happening. The expression on your face. The patience in your response. The fact that you did not demand reassurance. The way you somehow made space without becoming distant. And something inside them softened. Because suddenly they were no longer imagining only romantic moments with you. They were imagining difficult Mondays. Long drives. Unexpected changes of plan. Quiet mornings. Stressful weeks. Celebrations that did not go perfectly. Evenings when one person had more energy than the other. And instead of those ordinary realities making marriage feel less appealing, they made the idea of building a life with you feel more meaningful. That surprised them. Your soulmate once thought love was proven when everything felt extraordinary. Now they are beginning to understand that lasting love often proves itself when nothing extraordinary is happening at all. It is the person who notices when your voice sounds different. The person who can sit beside you without needing constant entertainment. The person who does not punish vulnerability. The person who can disagree without making affection disappear. The person who celebrates your becoming instead of trying to freeze you into the version of yourself they first met. Somewhere in their reflections, your soulmate began recognizing pieces of those qualities in you. And the more they recognized them, the harder it became to treat this connection casually. Something important is waiting for you, because there is another side to this decision they have not yet shown you. Your soulmate has started preparing emotionally for a future conversation. Not necessarily with rehearsed sentences. Not necessarily with some dramatic plan hidden away. Their preparation is quieter than that. They are asking themselves questions they used to avoid. What does commitment actually mean to me? What kind of home do I want to create? What would I need to change in myself to become a better partner? What am I willing to learn? What patterns do I refuse to carry into something serious? And perhaps the most revealing question of all, if this person truly became my life partner, would I know how to protect the connection without trying to control it? These are not the questions of someone merely enjoying a passing feeling. These are the questions of someone beginning to take the future seriously. And your soulmate is discovering that choosing you would require more than emotion. It would require consistency, listening, patience, accountability, humor, flexibility, the willingness to apologize, the willingness to speak instead of expecting you to read their mind. The willingness to support your individual dreams while building shared ones. Strangely, instead of making them retreat, those responsibilities are giving their feelings more direction. They are not only thinking, I want you. They are beginning to think, I want to become capable of loving you well. There is a maturity hidden inside that shift, and perhaps that is why this decision feels different from anything they experienced before. In the past, your soulmate may have measured connections by intensity. How quickly did everything happen? How much excitement was there? How strongly did they miss someone? How dramatic did the chemistry feel? But time taught them that intensity and depth are not always the same thing. Intensity can arrive suddenly. Depth usually reveals itself slowly. Depth grows when someone keeps becoming more interesting after the first mystery disappears. Depth grows when admiration survives familiarity. Depth grows when you discover imperfections and still remain curious about the person underneath them. Your soulmate has reached that stage with you. They are seeing more, not less. And what they are seeing has not made them want to walk away. It has made them want to understand you better. Stay till the end. Because there is one thought they keep returning to, and this thought may explain why their private decision feels increasingly real. They keep imagining a moment far in the future when the two of you look back on who you are now. They picture the things that will have changed by then. Different routines. Different priorities. New places. New challenges. Maybe new dreams neither of you has even discovered yet. And when they imagine that future, they do not want a relationship where both people remain exactly the same. They want one where both people can say, "We grew, and we learned how to keep meeting each other again." That image has become surprisingly powerful to them. Because your soulmate does not simply want someone to accompany the person they are today. They want someone who can walk beside the person they are still becoming. And something about you makes that seem possible. Maybe it is your curiosity. Maybe it is the way you recover after disappointment. Maybe it is how you continue learning from your own experiences. Maybe it is simply that you have never felt completely predictable to them. There are still layers they want to discover. There are still conversations they want to have. There are still sides of you they suspect only time will reveal. Instead of making them impatient, that mystery makes the idea of a long future together feel meaningful. They like the thought that marriage would not mean finally knowing everything about you. It would mean receiving more time to keep discovering you. And here is where something almost sacred enters the story, not as a guarantee, not as a command, but as a quiet invitation to see love differently. Heaven's message is not simply that your soulmate wants a ceremony, a ring, a photograph, or a public promise. The deeper revelation is that they are becoming attracted to the work of building something real with you. Anyone can be moved by a beautiful moment. But your soulmate is thinking about the mornings after the beautiful moments. The conversations after misunderstandings. The decisions that require compromise. The dreams that need planning. The little traditions that slowly turn two separate lives into a shared history. That is where their mind keeps going now. And once someone begins falling in love with the idea of building, not merely receiving, marriage starts becoming a very different kind of dream. Your soulmate has also noticed something about themselves that they did not expect. Thinking about you has made them less interested in pretending they are completely independent. Not dependent in an unhealthy way, something more honest than that. They are recognizing that there is strength in allowing another person to matter. For a long time, perhaps they believed needing connection made people vulnerable in a way that should be avoided. They told themselves they could handle everything alone. They became good at being self-contained. Good at hiding disappointment. Good at acting unaffected when something touched them deeply. But caring for you began disrupting that old pattern. Suddenly they had someone whose opinion mattered. Someone whose happiness could brighten their day. Someone whose absence could make a room feel different. And instead of fighting that truth forever, they are beginning to accept it. You matter to them. More than they originally intended. More than they can explain away. More than casual language can comfortably hold. That acceptance may be one reason you have sensed changes that seemed difficult to interpret. A longer pause before they answer you. An unexpected softness in their voice. A question about your future disguised as casual conversation. A sudden interest in your plans several years from now. Maybe they asked what kind of place you would love to live in. Maybe they wondered what traditions mattered to you. Maybe they listened more carefully when you mentioned family, work, dreams, routines, or the kind of life that would make you feel peaceful? Those questions are not always accidental. Sometimes people begin collecting pieces of a future before they admit they are building one in their imagination. Your soulmate has been doing this quietly. They are learning what matters to you because some part of them wants to know whether your futures could belong in the same story. And there was another moment, different from the first one, that deepened everything. You said something about yourself that was more honest than you realized. Perhaps you admitted a dream you had been afraid to name. Perhaps you spoke about something you wanted to become better at. Perhaps you laughed about one of your flaws instead of hiding it. Your soulmate watched you reveal that imperfect, hopeful part of yourself, and something inside them moved. Not because you appeared flawless, but because you appeared real. They could suddenly imagine years of conversations like that. Two people sitting somewhere after the day had ended, talking about what went right, what went wrong, what they were learning, what they still hoped to become. That picture stayed with them. It showed them that intimacy is not only being desired. It is being known gradually and still welcomed. Don't skip this part, because your soulmate is beginning to understand that one of the greatest things they could ever offer you is not a perfect promise. It is a reliable presence. Anyone can promise that nothing will ever change, but life always changes. People grow. Circumstances shift. New responsibilities arrive. Plans evolve. What matters is whether two people can keep turning toward each other honestly while those changes happen. Your soulmate is beginning to want that kind of promise with you. Not everything will always be easy. Something stronger, when things change, I want to keep learning how to meet you there. That realization moved marriage from fantasy into something they could respect. And respect matters deeply here. Because attraction may begin a story, but respect often determines whether people want to keep writing it. Your soulmate respects more about you than they have said aloud. They respect the parts of you that continued after disappointment. They respect the boundaries you learned to build. They respect that you have your own mind. They respect the way you can care without disappearing inside someone else's needs. They respect something about your resilience, even if they do not know every story behind it. And somewhere along the way, admiration began mixing with affection. That mixture became powerful. Because when someone loves the way you make them feel but also respects the person you are when their feelings are not involved, the connection begins reaching deeper ground. Your soulmate has been standing on that ground lately. And yet, there is still hesitation. Not doubt about your value. Something subtler. They know a future cannot be created privately by one person. They can imagine marriage, prepare themselves for commitment, and even decide internally that you are the person they would choose, but they cannot assume your answer. That realization has made them more careful. They are thinking about your freedom, your dreams, your readiness, your truth. They know that real partnership requires two voices. And strangely, respecting your ability to choose has only strengthened what they feel. Because they do not want you beside them because you were pressured into a future. They want you beside them because one day, through honest conversation, both of you recognize something worth choosing together. That is why the next step matters so much. Your soulmate knows there is a conversation somewhere ahead. Maybe it begins casually. Maybe neither of you expects it to become important. Perhaps you are talking about someone else's wedding, a future trip, home, a dream, or simply what you believe love should feel like. Then the atmosphere changes. Their voice becomes a little slower, a little more deliberate. And suddenly they ask you something they have been carrying for weeks. When you picture your future, what does it look like? On the surface, the question seems simple. Underneath it, they are listening for something much deeper. Is there room for partnership in your vision? Do your values move in similar directions? Do you want the same kind of emotional life? Are there dreams that could support one another instead of competing? And most quietly of all, could there be room for them? Something important is waiting for you at the other side of that question. Because your soulmate is not only preparing to reveal what they want. They are preparing to discover what you want. That is where fantasy becomes relationship. That is where imagined futures begin meeting reality. And there is beauty in that, because whatever happens next will be built through truth rather than assumption. Your soulmate has learned that love becomes more meaningful when both people are allowed to speak honestly. So when the conversation finally happens, they may surprise you by listening more than talking. They may ask questions. They may want to understand the details that matter to you. What does commitment mean in your eyes? What makes you feel respected? What kind of home would feel peaceful? What parts of your independence are important to protect? What dreams must remain yours even inside a partnership? These are not questions that weaken romance. They are the questions that give romance somewhere stable to live. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that. But there is still one secret hidden beneath all of this. One reason deeper than comfort, deeper than attraction, deeper even than the peaceful future they have started imagining. It is connected to a change they noticed inside themselves after meeting you. A change they did not realize was happening until someone close to them pointed it out. One day, someone looked at your soulmate and said something unexpectedly simple. It was not even directly about you at first. Yet those words stopped them completely because they revealed what your soulmate had been unable to see from inside their own heart. After that conversation, the thought of marrying you became almost impossible to dismiss. And what that person noticed about them may be the clearest explanation yet for why your soulmate has already begun choosing you in the quiet places where the biggest decisions are made.